welcome back everyone to Red Spotlight. I'm your host Alexis, joined by David. David, how are you today?
I'm good.
We've been not doing anything for a few weeks. Well, I mean, we've been doing other stuff for sure, but a lot has happened, of course, and we're going to be here to discuss, not the least of which includes an expanded film slate, or at least some of the film and television productions that are coming our way from DC Studios, courtesy of James Gunn, that he announced, and of course how we feel about that, including some Super Bowl trailers that include a big one, The Flash, and of course Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. We'll take a little bit of a deep dive into how people are talking about the latest Marvel production, Quantumania, and we'll see what else we talk about here on Red Spotlight 431. You know, there's actually kind of a lot of things happening all at once right now, right? Like, maybe it's kind of, I don't know, it gets old saying that, but it really does feel like there's a lot of different things going on at once. We're getting trailers from some movies this year. We're honestly pretty close to the beginning of a pretty extraordinary run of stacked big scale movies that we haven't really seen since before COVID. And I think it starts in March, where it's just like go, 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 go. We have big hitters coming our way, including a big Marvel movie that comes out this week. But of course you have Mario in April, and in June we begin with Guardians 3, and I believe also in July we're going to go with Indiana Jones. I don't recall at the top of my head, David, unless you do, what the release date for The Flash is, but I have to assume it's somewhere in the summer. So a lot of big films are coming in our direction. And of course, it's in that weird transition time because at the moment, awards season, well, these last 2 weeks, they kind of hit a pause because they had to make space for, well, part of the awards season, I guess you could say, because it happens at the same time every year, would be the Grammys, which they came and went. We don't really talk about that here because there's really not much to say, right? It's like we don't all listen to the same music anyway, so there's not much of a conversation to be had there. And then of course Super Bowl, well, there's even less talk about that. It was that was going on. So these last 2 weeks have been nothing as far as the awards season is concerned, but it's going to pick up. And if I'm being honest with you, it kind of feels like it's already over. Like, as soon as the nominations came out, it kind of seems pretty obvious how things are going to shake out. And I kind of hate framing it this way because it is going to be an exciting night, I guess, because the film that should win most likely is going to win, and it's going to win everything except for Michelle Yeoh. Which is pretty sad in and of itself if that's what's actually going to happen. But it seems like it's going to end up winning picture, director, screenplay, editing, and maybe some other ones. And supporting actor for Kiki Kwan. And I'm referring to Everything Everywhere All at Once, if for those who weren't aware. Yeah. So it kind of seems like a done deal, and so it's kind of boring at this time of year. I mean, well, this season, it was so exciting, and now it's just kind of like, well, I guess we know how it's going to shake out. So there's that. And in the meantime, there's also a bunch of like different news about what is coming ahead as far as the industry is concerned. And of course, all of this is happening at the same time. Everybody seems to be catching up with the latest sensation coming out of home box office, better known, of course, as HBO. And that would be, interestingly enough, another another big sensation for Mr. Pedro Pascal, but one that actually includes his face for a change. And maybe, dare I even say, not pulling any punches here, some actual acting involved, because otherwise he's behind a helmet most of the time on the other show. And I don't want to dare, utter its name, but, before we know it, I'm looking at the calendar right now, David. It is the 15th of February. It was just Valentine's Day. By the time that this is uploaded, it'll be, the 18th, I want to say, or the 19th of February. March the 1st is not that far away. And that's when it's back. And, oh, God. I'm just letting people know that's going to unleash a series of rants, probably on a weekly basis, if we're being honest with ourselves. Yeah. It's just
I've been seeing some reactions from The Last of Us, and so they keep bringing up the Mandalorian's gonna come out when episode 8 of The Last of Us comes out, and they're like, man, we're gonna see a night and day scenario with his acting with the Mandalorian and The Last of Us. It's like he's not bad in the Mandalorian. You just can't see his face.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would say... I don't think any critic of him or the show would say that Pedro Pascal is the problem, first and foremost. It's not him. Because he has no say in the material that he's being handed. That is all, brought to him by the writers and the filmmakers on the show. And so that's where the responsibility should be at. But I would argue that the real day and night scenario is going to be the difference between a really great show. Again, I can't speak to it. I haven't seen The Last of Us. I'm not going to see The Last of Us. I'll explain in a few minutes here why. But considering that it's from HBO, considering the impact that it's already had in just 5 weeks, or 5 episodes, and I guess 4 weeks, 4.5 weeks, because they aired, I think, an episode earlier because of the Super Bowl, which they might do again for the Oscars, I want to say. But then again, it's sad that the Oscars are not really competition. The Super Bowl is, and there again is one of my really frustrating things is, whether it is, low attendance at a theater or physical media being completely phased out of like stores that they're mostly, synonymous with, like Best Buy or Target. Everywhere you look, films and the impact of overall movies just seems to get less and less relevant with the overall populace. And of course, the ratings of the Oscars themselves really kind of like give credence to that. Whereas you look at the Super Bowl and you look at sports and it's like, well, that's never going to go away. And I never watch because of that. It's like, I don't care to begin with, and I don't care to support that because, you know what? Yeah, that's a different situation. And I just find, honestly, that just to be so boring because when you look, and I don't want to, I guess, go into a rant about like football teams or the NFL, but like really, what the fuck are you fighting over for? A bunch of people throwing a ball around in a team that's just going to end up throwing you away after a season. I don't understand the loyalty to, I guess, a logo, because none of these people stay very long and they end up getting too old to play. And then it's just, it's always been like beyond me why that is just so captivating for people. And yet, evidently the Fableman's bored at the living hell out of everybody. So I don't know what to say to that other than like, I guess different people, right? Different strokes, whatever. But that's a whole different situation. But the point overall being is The Last of Us, based on every word of mouth, based on all indication, is a truly extraordinary series and one of the best adaptations of a video game maybe ever. And clearly in just 5 episodes cleans the clock out of the previous poster boy for zombie apocalyptic genre, shall we say, which was The Walking Dead. And if I'm being honest with you, The Walking Dead in and of itself is kind of a big reason why I'm really tired of this particular genre of stories, even though recognizing, of course, that it's not comparing apples to apples here. They're not entirely the same thing, but they do have, I guess, certain similarities to it. I'm not really in the mood. Like, I guess the same way that I've said for years now, and you may have heard me say this in the last few episodes, that especially the last one, I think, where we discussed the nominations to the Academy Awards, that there are 2 films that were nominated for Best Picture amongst other categories that fit the description of movies, or I guess the genre of movie, that I'm kind of really sick and tired of. Like, no matter how good you make that kind of movie, I just can't, because I'm just tired of it. And the 2 films I'm referring to are All Quiet on the Western Front, which is your standard war picture that ends up getting in here, like a Dunkirk or a 1917, which those are 2 films that were recently nominated in recent years. And then, of course, there's Elvis, which is the musical biopic, and quite recently we had Bohemian Rhapsody included. So, again, and both of which I want to be clear here, I think both Elvis and Quiet on the Western Front are really good movies. I just, because they're what they are, I can only, like, go so far with them, if you know what I'm saying here. And I think the same can be said of, like, zombie apocalypse or apocalyptic stories. I'm just like, okay, I don't know what I'm really getting out of here. I'm going to get out of here. But based on what I've been hearing that is really kind of just window dressing. There's a lot of there beyond just the usual dressings of an apocalyptic story. And it's actually it's getting the HBO treatment in which attention to character and attention to humanity is kind of being prioritized more so than the standard, I guess you would call it zombie of the week kind of episode where it's like, oh, we have to run. Although from what I saw, it looked like the 5th episode was kind of more along those lines, where a bunch of, I guess, clickers or bloaters, whatever you want to call them, infiltrate a place and people will run away. And yeah, I don't know. I guess, like, in the midst of, like, things that are happening in the world and where I'm at, like, in my mental space, I don't know what good it does me to see a show where, maybe it's unfair to say in all instances, because I know there was one episode that just mainly featured 2 actors, and that was entirely standalone, and that was beautiful from what I heard. But maybe it's unfair to say that because of that every episode would be like that. But I just, it just seems a bit depressing for me. And to be fair, for a lot of people who are loving The Last of Us, I would wager that a lot of them kind of steer away from quote unquote adult dramas, if only because of the subject matter is very depressing, right? Like, there are many movies that, let's say, are of awards caliber that are just fucking sad to watch.
I mean, Joker was probably one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, I could name a bunch, and, like, they're worth the watch, but at the end of the day, you kind of want to do it like a one and done.
Yeah, because it's like you have to find some kind of enjoyment in it, right? Like, even films that I still think one of the best movies ever made is Schindler's List, right? But I mean, I don't think that's ever going to be a movie to turn on at a pizza party. It's like, no. So it's like sometimes everybody, has their thing that maybe I just don't want to see this, no matter how good it could be. So, but it's fine. I'll sit this one out. I mean, I know plenty of others in our group that have sat out for several different things, and that's fine. I know that everybody else here, which even includes Kyle, which is a miracle because it's kind of hard to get him to see anything these days. Speaking of which, I have a rant to go on involving him later on when we go to Turning Red. That's so incredibly annoying. But not to belabor the point, even though it's already been 15 minutes we've been recording here, but we're going to start off with that because it really is kind of a sensation. It maybe even was almost immediately a sensation. And just we had an opportunity to meet in person, David, this past weekend, which is rare for us, because you're in another state. But we met with Peter and with Kyle, and the excitement that was coming off of you guys was just like, wow, I haven't seen, I want to say that kind of like enthusiasm and just pure, genuine excitement for a show that was that universal since Game of Thrones. The original Game of Thrones, I want to say.
Oh, okay.
So this is where you can go ahead and pick it up from here. It's like how you feel the show has been going along. And I suspect perhaps you also were a fan, if not least an aficionado of the actual game.
Yes. I was very...
That's a plug for your podcast, which is called...
Yes, Quest Center.
With Sergio Ramos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we already did an episode of the first part of the game. It was really good, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah, I really liked that. We did briefly talk about the first 2 episodes on that one too. We went spoilers on it, but yeah, whatever. Yeah, but check that out. But yeah, I have been loving the show so far. There was like a lot of anticipation for this show, not just because it's a video game adaptation, but because there's sort of like controversy going into it. Mainly that the second part of the game, like it was 50-50 on the critics. Some people absolutely hated it. Some people absolutely loved it. Peter said like it was the Last Jedi of video games.
You got that kind of reaction.
Yeah, basically. And so people are kind of like, are you gonna change it up in any way?
But you know what? I'm gonna hijack this again because I'm really sick and tired of people like calling the Star Wars movies that Disney did. I'm gonna zero in on the trilogy, the new sequel trilogy. I'm really sick and tired of people saying that like damaged the brand or that it was a disaster. I think you can say that one movie is a disaster, and it did. It wasn't good, and there are a lot of reasons why it wasn't good. But like, hey, like when most people are saying that, they don't just mean the one movie. They're saying that Force Awakens, which they loved one time, and then they all turned around and said it was a remake or a rehash and it was boring. And then, of course, you throw in Last Jedi in there, which like half of the people loved and half the people didn't like or violently hated. I would, maybe even qualify there. It's just so depressing to me, and I'm not going to shut up about it, how it is that, characters like Rey, Finn, and Poe, for instance, are kind of like afterthoughts nowadays. And even if you see in the representation in the Disney commercials or in the Disney parks, there's only one character, and it's not even a character that like connects with people, and it's just a stupid baby that doesn't even say anything or do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it really kind of just speaks to, this is going to come off really insensitive, I want to say, but like there is a certain intellectual curiosity that is just lost on many people. If you are really going to come at me and say that you consider the quote unquote characterization of Mandalorian with its 2 main leads as something that is deeply profound and kicks the crap out of the characterization, not in quotes, because there actually was in the sequel movies. And I just had to say that out there. But like what you were alluding to is like the Last of Us sequel, or the part 2 you want to say, got a treatment that was similar to The Last Jedi, which is the other tangent here. And that is, why is it that we consider a divisive reaction somehow even worse than a unanimously bad reaction? Because there's a lot of crap out there.
Mm-hmm.
And if, we'll tie this in later on with the whole Marvel stuff, but for instance, Marvel has had a string lately of rather adequate to standard movies that are being perceived as awful. But like, that's kind of been the thing for years now.
Mm-hmm.
for years and years, and all of a sudden people are like, wait a minute, why isn't this working for me anymore? And it's like, well, Marvel in and of itself, and in particular, if you look at the reaction and the Rotten Tomato scores, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a testament to like so many bad movies in that universe pre-Endgame. I'm going to put it out there. Yeah, pre-Endgame that got a pass and got overwhelmingly positive reviews. And yet, The Last Jedi is considered to be like the worst moment that broke Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I need to push back against that because I just hate it. I really do. And it's not true either. It's just a thing that gets propagated up again and again and again and again. And again, we'll circle back to Star Wars later on. But your point and Peter's point overall was that this had a very divisive reaction. I didn't see much controversy going into the show. From my perception, then again, you know more than I do, but my perception was before anything even aired, there was a lot of genuine excitement. I recall that the week that Pedro Pascal was cast in the show, I think that's the same week that Gina Carano got fired from the Star Wars stuff, which was funny. The only controversy that I'm seeing is two big things. The first one, this is kind of the one that all TV shows nowadays have to contend with, and that is audience impatience. Audience impatience in terms of like two buzzwords I'm thinking of. One is filler, and the other is like, I guess, breakaway or camp away or episodes that deviate from the main storyline. Well, the thing is, people are conflating those two. They're not the same thing, but they're treating them as the same thing. It's like perhaps one of the best, what was referred to one of the best moments in all of television was the third episode of The Last of Us. Mm-hmm. And that can be described as a standalone story that breaks away from the main, storyline or whatever you want to say. And this is not new. This has been around for years and years and years now. You and I watch a lot of TV over the years, and it's the same thing with almost every TV show. And I think it's not the shows that's the problem. This is another example of the audience that's the problem, and how like habits and attitudes have changed throughout the decades. And that, filler is a very different thing. Like, again, you and I follow anime. Mm-hmm. We can get into some real filler there. That's the definition of what filler is. Yeah. But like the idea that stories that just hit a pause, and then for me, I've always had the opposite belief that when you hit pause on the main storyline, there you can find moments to shine. I feel like this may be unpopular to say so. But like, I really did like The Walking Dead, like in the first 4 or 5 seasons. I guess looking back on it now, a lot of it really didn't, muster or add up to much of anything. But in spite of all of it, there were a couple of episodes here or there that I do recall that they may have been placed in an arc that ultimately went nowhere and was meaningless. It still resonates. Like one of the Walking Dead episodes that still sticks with me is the one with Carol and Tyrese, I believe. And I think they also have the baby with them. Mm-hmm. And that whole thing is centered around like her being honest with Tyrese that she killed, his sister or his girlfriend? I don't recall which one. But one of those. Yeah. It's been years now. But that was a genuinely great episode to watch. Yeah. Oh, and I think that she also... Was that the episode Look at the Flowers? Yep. Oh, yeah, you see that probably may be the best episode of the series. Mm-hmm. Like, and that's why that's an example of what people would label as filler, and it's like, but it's genuinely amazing storytelling. Like, what's your complaint here? You see? So I've seen this show just be another one of another TV show that exists that has to suffer this fate because people are just annoyingly impatient. Yeah. That's one thing. The other thing that people are complaining, and I'll give you a chance here, and I'm not going to say much about this, but the other thing is the usual stuff, which is the right-wing, alt-right cronies, that, circle around Daily Wire or Geeks and Gamers or follow Ben Shapiro or Gina Carano, all those people. Their whole ideology is inherently just deficient from an intellectual standpoint. Because every time they have an issue, it's literally, no, you guys are what's causing all the problems. You're the only ones that, want to... The conservatives, these people who I'm talking about, always attack everything with the blanket woke. First of all, if you use that word, I think you need to question your life choices. And if you think that's a bad thing, you need to question your life choices, first of all. And we've gone ad nauseum about that. I'm not going to get into that here. But the point there being is this. The very people who are complaining about like things having a propaganda of some sort, well, they have their own propaganda. That's how this works, right? Like, they don't like what's in there because they have their own agenda that they want to shove down your throats too. Like these people who criticize anything that comes out of Hollywood in stories for having like politics at all involved probably voted for, GOP candidates up and down the ballot that are gonna seriously inhibit free speech and have already really made a disastrous impact on education. I work in education, and there are certain GOP representatives in power, like Ron DeSantis in Florida, who have passed horrendous legislation that can honestly really be considered cancel culture the law, when you're erasing people through legislation and you're telling people you can't talk about anything or you can't talk about a certain kind of person. That's cancel culture. So again, these people are like, they don't have anything, they don't have a leg to stand on, because everywhere you look at what they do and what they say and what they ended up like backing, they're full of shit. And yet, of course, they can't help themselves, right? This has been a really bad thing since Captain Marvel, really. I guess Last Jedi is the first time these people had like a big voice and they kind of got high on it and they kept going and going and going. And so now the Woman King was a really pathetic example. It's like, oh, they made a movie with black women. It's like, oh, however will we recover? I thought that was pretty embarrassing. But based on what I saw with how they reacted to the third episode of this series, that has to be a new low for them. Not in terms of like, oh, they were really like bad people. No, that has to be a new like low level of embarrassment for them. Like, how pathetic can you be? Like the reactions, and to be clear, the homophobic reactions, and I guess that's the same thing as saying the reactions in the alt-right. Really? It's all one and the same, right? Mm-hmm. We're a new low of like, wow. Yeah. Those were the controversies that I'm aware of with the show, Mm-hmm. But like, yeah, that's a whole different thing. But I have seen two scenes. I think I saw the first two scenes of the first two episodes, which are pretty freaking like devastating from two different standpoints. The effects looked really good from what I've seen. Those blowers or those clickers look fucking terrifying. Yeah. I saw Melanie Linsky was on the show, and I'm happy for her. She's a great actor. I remember her from the 2.5 Men days. She played Charlie Sheen's girlfriend. She's come a long way from what I've seen. And yeah, there's a lot that's there for sure. Go ahead, David. I've been talking long enough. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it like they sort of like hit a new low, and it's definitely showing in this one, because this is like such a fantastic show, and they can't get past the fact, oh my gosh, they made an episode with a gay couple the entire time. The fuck is this? And I'm kind of like,
it's like, gay people exist?
I know.
How dare you put that on my what? Like,
mm-hmm. And they have like the same arguments too of like, oh, what if what if the roles were reversed? You know, it's like it wouldn't be the same. It's like, oh my gosh.
The one that I can't stand is when they involve their children in this. Like when they out themselves and they reveal that they watch the show with their children. Okay. Again, I mentioned people like Ron DeSantis. I mentioned GOP candidates and lawmakers and geeks and gamers. They're all in the same circle here. Okay. A big thing that they're going with, or they did in this last election, and again, in the recent State of the Union, the evidence is there. The president made a comment. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to be long. He's not going to fight for it. He's toothless and feckless. And it was just a buzzword. Again, to be real with you. But he just said something as like banal as, let's give teachers a raise. And you know what the Republicans in attendance did? They just sat there. They didn't clap. They didn't stand up. Why? Because it goes in contradiction with their main agenda, which is like, oh, they're just calling all teachers groomers now.
Mm-hmm.
And pedophiles. Because they want to teach children about the world, I guess. And the kind of people that exist in the world. So the very people who get on their high horse about like, well, why should teachers get to decide what's taught in schools, which is a so stupid argument in and of itself. But the very people who like more than likely think that are telling on themselves that they're watching a show about the end of the world in a very violent and apocalyptic, literally by its like genre's sake, way, where people pretty much are horribly disfigured and are murdered on the regular, I would wager. Oh, it's okay for your child to be exposed to that. What?
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah.
You were saying.
But I mean, I really don't understand much of the criticisms. Yeah, they mentioned episode 3 and they're calling it, you know, this feels like filler. This story was kind of pointless. And I'll say this. I don't know if I ever did mention this, but like there's a difference between plot development and story development.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, yeah, sure. Everything that we saw in episode 3, you know, it didn't move much things forward. I mean, there was like a little bit of stuff and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But that episode's gonna be very important for the ending. If you played the games, you know what happens in the end, and it's gonna be very, very important, especially with what happens in episode 5 too. And so, like that's the difference between story development and plot development. That's all I can say really without spoiling much. But yeah, and then with episode 5, you know, again they'll attack anything. Like I literally saw a video where people complain of this one character, Sam. They changed his character in that he's deaf in the show. He wasn't deaf in the game. And people were complaining about it because they were like, oh my gosh, they're trying to be inclusive. They're just changing it for representation's sakes. And I'm kind of like, I mean, they gave a reason in the like the post show, then that the reason why they did it is so that there's more of a reason for Henry, which is the older brother of Sam, to be more protective of his brother. You know, to really like have that need of like, I am the only person that can take care of him, and he's become my purpose because of that, you know?
But you see, David, I think you've just exposed something else entirely here. Another, I think, another way that audiences today have grown impatient, and I would even say absurd, because I guess from a fundamental standpoint, and this is, I guess, this just goes back to fan culture of anything, particularly with adaptations. In that is, there are a lot of fans that do not like adaptations, or they don't. I mean, it's like they don't seem to understand what it means. Like, adaptations inherently mean you are going to be changing some things from their original source material. And there are people still that are like very hardline, and they're just opposed fundamentally from any kind of changes to the source material. And I just think that's insane. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Okay, so one small thing was changed, but what you said there, okay, from a narrative standpoint, they made it work and they made it flow better. That's why it's called an adaptation. That's why these things happen. Okay, there's a justification for it, whatever. But look at what I had to like suppress a laugh when you said that like people were complaining, oh, just because they wanted to be inclusive. Why do you think that's a bad thing? Okay, so they wanted to include people who traditionally are invisible. And what do you not understand? You're saying you'd rather they remain in their place? Is that what you're trying to say? Are you trying to say that they have no place in stories like this that you are watching? Like, the whole point of, or one of the points I would say of cinema is to transport you to somebody else's life that you ordinarily would not interact with, you know? And I guess the hope of cinema, maybe I should say, is to instill a sense of empathy in you, that you could, for a few minutes or a couple of hours, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, you know? And kind of like connect and relate to them. But more and more, and I'm just gonna put it in the same category as Geeks and Gamers, the alt-right trolls, all of them, in that is they're continually telling on themselves that they cannot relate to a story that is not centered around people that they commonly associate with, which are ding, 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 white people. If a story includes anybody else besides that, then they start complaining. Because some of them actually say it when, like, I can't relate. Like the whole Turning Red fiasco. That film got a bad deal for a number of reasons, not the least of which include, you know, Bob Chapek being an ass and an idiot. But there were actual people who their response was, oh, I was never a girl. So I can't obviously, I can't relate to these characters. I don't understand what they're going through, and it's not for me. What? Then if you're that kind of person, then maybe stories aren't for you.
Yeah.
Just in general, if that's what you're gonna, you know, go at it with it.
I do want to say that, like, I am pretty biased on the show because I was still playing the game when the first episode came out. And so when I saw the first episode, you know, I had literally just seen that exact same thing from the game before, and so I couldn't really go like, oh, this was a fantastic episode. No, I was just kind of like, all right, they did everything from the game. That's cool. You know, it's like there's not much I can like really express about this episode, about that episode, and it's still happening throughout these. Like you know, something happens in the game, and I go, oh my gosh, they added that in. That's really cool. And then not much else, except for episode 3, where it completely deviated from the game, and I go, oh, that's fantastic. And not just because they deviated from the game, it's because, oh, you did something different, but I love the story that you just told right here. You know, it's like I can separate things easily too. And again, I can be pretty biased with it too. And we'll get into with the How to Train Your Dragon thing, that too. How that I'm gonna be pretty biased on that too. But yeah, it's just, I mean, they're really stretching as to like what exactly they can hate from the show. And a lot of it is because, you know, changes from the game, the whole woke bullshit type of thing, and because of what they did with part 2. And it's all just kind of stupid in the end.
But it's also, it's all those things. But I feel like my patience to entertain this mentality of the customer is always right is, I'm done with it. And I feel like we need to start like calling it what it is, and that is the audience is part of the problem too.
And you just mentioned too the impatience of it. That's the other thing that's super annoying too, because like episode 4 comes out, and that actress from Two and a Half Men, they see her, and right away they're like already giving all these opinions about her. Which one of them was because of her weight, which is like, what the fuck.
And again, that's also a pattern, because remember one of the main line of attacks for what's her name, Kelly Marie Tran in The Last Jedi was fat Asian bitch.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, like, I get the racism. Okay, I mean, I'm not excusing it, but I get that you would go there, and that, okay, fine, that's easy. But why would you include the fat part in there? She's not. She's not. And like, what? So it's, yeah. That I just wanted to connect it to that, because that's also a pattern I've seen too.
Mm-hmm. And then the one that I find it so hilarious, and it really like shows their colors, is that they keep criticizing how the women look in the show, where they're like, oh, they're
what?
In that they don't look feminine enough, and that the show is purposely trying to make them look uglier. And then when I'm looking at the show, I'm like, your version of ugly is just them not wearing makeup. That's all you're saying.
Yeah, because I'm sorry, did they not get the memo that this show takes place, after civilization collapsed?
Mm-hmm. Or not wearing makeup, but like wearing very little makeup. That's really all your complaints.
Yeah, like in a zombie apocalypse, where are you going to get your supplies for that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just not feasible. And also, like, yeah, that's just dumb at the end of the day. But then again, if they tried to make the men more feminine, well, then that would be like, no.
Mm-hmm.
No, like, they have to make the man masculine. Like, well, okay, whatever. Those people are annoying. But anyway, not to make the entire discussion about Last of Us about that. Can I ask you though, like, genuinely, like, the piece that I'm missing is, so this is a show about the last of civilization. What is, I guess, because people were saying, okay, well, it deviated from the story. What is the storyline here? What is this leading to?
I mean,
everybody, the world ended. People are gone for the most part. What? Because one of the things that The Walking Dead ultimately suffered from was it had nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
It made you think for a couple of seasons it was going somewhere, but then it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, what do you do after the world, is over? So, like, what's the show setting up here? Because I'm not seeing that part.
Yeah. So I mean, this is just in the beginning of it, so it's not that much spoilery. But basically, Joel, the main character, this takes place 20 years after like the apocalypse started. So like,
because it happened in 2003, and this is now we're 2023.
Yeah. And this guy, he's very much hardened. He lost his family. He just kind of like stays to himself and all that.
So he lost his daughter.
Yeah,
the original daughter. How did she die?
She got shot by a soldier. At that time, things were going crazy, so they were like, okay, this zone here.
But David, that really bums me out, because like, you think that she would get a more, I don't know, glorious death than that. I mean, she could get shot today and it would be like a Tuesday by a soldier. I mean, that's just, there's nothing I'm kidding. That's a really tasteless joke to make. I'm sorry. But it's just like, that's not really anything new. I mean, that could happen tomorrow and nobody would bat an eye. That's sad, but that would just be, I guess, Thursday.
Yeah.
You'd think it's not that she would get bitten or eaten or, killed. She was just shot by a soldier.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's what they would do.
Mm.
Like, I think there was a line Nick Offerman said that they were always fascists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so one day he meets this woman who's like asking him for a favor. I need you to smuggle something, and the something is Ellie, a girl who somehow is immune to the bites. She literally got bit, and it healed. And so now it's just like a cross-country road trip between the two, where he both of them slowly start to care about each other. You know, it's basically Logan, but zombie apocalypse and no powers.
Well, it kind of reminds me, it's similar, but I guess the difference here is actually going to mean worth shit. Because in The Walking Dead, they had a storyline where you had, I think it was Abraham, Rosita, and Eugene. And they came in, I think, late in or they came in early on in the 5th season. And their storyline was that Eugene was a scientist for the CDC and that he had a cure for like the zombies and stuff, and that Abraham was like with him for protection, and that they were traveling the country to go to Washington and get the cure and everything. Of course, that went nowhere. That was inevitably revealed to be a ruse, and so that was useless. But it's basically kind of the same thing here, but it actually matters in this show. In that they're going to go not necessarily to a destination, but or is there a destination?
Yeah, there's a destination where basically this group called the Fireflies, they want to take her to their I guess science camp, and that's where they're gonna like analyze her and see if they can somehow make a cure or some kind of vaccine with her blood.
I guess this is a stupid question, but like, again, this is maybe getting a bit into forensics, but part of why I don't want to get anywhere near this is because what's different now that wasn't really a factor when I was watching The Walking Dead is we actually just went through a pandemic. you know?
Yeah.
Like, that's...
For sure. There was this thing in the game called spores, where basically if someone gets bit, I don't know how exactly it works, but like if there's someone infected and dies, their like body, I guess, decomposes and they send out spores, and it's basically like the disease spreading into the air. Oh, but it was always like isolated in certain areas. You know, like if it's in the building, it will just stay there. And usually when you go through a place where there's spores, you mask up. And but they took that out in the show. Instead, now it's not spores, it's just like the fungus growing into the ground and into the walls. And if you touch it, that's sending a signal to other infected, and they'll like go straight at you.
Oh shit!
Yeah. Holy
crap!
And part of the reason why they took out the spores, though, is one, they didn't want to put masks on the actors. But I also heard one where they were like, if this was in real life, no one's gonna put on a mask.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
So, if a vaccine were to be cured, I would assume they could mass produce that to make everybody who's left immune. But then that also begs the question, the infected, as they're called. Ultimately, so from what I've been able to piece together, the fungus completely takes over their system and they become a different organism altogether. But then they also share a hive mind?
Yeah, in a sense. So far, it's just like whatever grows on the ground. When the fungus grows on the ground, it can act like as a hive mind. I don't know if maybe like if you kill. So far, I don't think it's like if you kill one random infected, like in the middle of the forest, it's not like you'll contact them. It's just not much. There's not much detail about it. So far as we know, it's just whatever grows on the ground. If you touch it, or step on it, or like hurt it in some way, it'll contact the rest of them.
Do the infected want anything as organisms? Are they just like creatures that just seek and destroy?
Probably more so that, and more than anything, they probably just want to spread out, maybe.
Like a virus would.
Yeah.
That's all really it exists for. Because I was going to say, if it was kind of like how, I don't know if you've seen the Quiet Place movies, if it's kind of like the aliens that are like there, because aliens come down and all they do is just kill. They don't eat you, they just kill. Do the infected eat people or they just kill them?
I think they just, no, they eat people actually, yeah. I think that's how they kind of like keep the body going a bit.
So an infected, if it were to come across a human, they would eat them. Oh, that's gross.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know these are like really basic questions. I'm just like, this is where my curiosity goes to. How are there like large encampments, and how do they separate themselves from the infected? And how, like, yeah, go ahead.
That they explained that they basically bombed entire cities, big cities, bombing them, trying to get rid of as much as they can. And they mentioned that it worked on some places and it didn't work on others. So like basically there's certain cities that are just gone, you know. And so the one that we're at, it worked pretty well. They were able to like contain the infected in long enough to make an encampment, basically create a wall and separate them.
To trap them in.
No, to protect the living, to keep the infected outside, basically. You know, and there's other things too. I think they mentioned in one city that they drove the infected into tunnels and all that. So yeah, I mean, there's all different. They're showing us different ways as to how they kind of like created how it is today, basically.
Yeah. Okay. And well, I guess what we can go now to is, at long last, 50 minutes into this,
I know,
talk about as to the actual quality of the stories. And from what I've been able to just feel, you seem to really love the show, and this is pretty freaking amazing.
Yeah, basically. Like I said, it's this sort of cross-country road trip between these two, and throughout their trips, they're seeing different kinds of people and how they've survived into this world and how that's affected them. And some people become very much hardened, like Joel, and others do still have like the little bit of hope in them. And the big thing about it is that how exactly do you want to live your life? You know, episode 3, you see another character who is very much hardened, but met someone. A man meets another man, and they make a life together. Was it perfect? No, because it's an apocalypse. But it was something better than before, where the hardened guy was just alone for many years. You know. And so yeah, that's basically what the show is. It's preserving the last of humanity, not just like other people, but like of your humanity, of yourself. You know. And I mean, so far, there are some depressing moments, for sure. But overall, like, it is kind of a pretty beautiful story of wanting to protect everything that you have.
For sure. And I'm going to assume since it's an HBO show, there are 5 episodes left?
I heard there's only gonna be 9 episodes. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's probably 4 or 5 episodes left.
Well, look, based on everything I've heard and that we've discussed, it sounds like a truly incredible show, and certainly not to be missed out. So, I'm going to attempt in the following week. So we need to get Alexis back on here. To get some recaps for the episodes and as far as the show is concerned. But from what I've been hearing, it's all good. Not really anything bad to mention here. In the show, I mean. There's plenty of bad to mention as far as the conversation surrounding the show as we went ahead and dug into that. So we're going to go ahead and leave that conversation there. Speaking of adaptations, I guess we can go ahead and transition into this now, since you did mention this, and that was news that broke today that is rather distressing. I think there's no better word to describe it than distressing, because it is what it suggests about what could come of this is rather horrid. Live action remakes of animated movies is kind of long since been a touchy issue for some of us here on this podcast for many, many years. Maybe because, for one, all of the Disney live action remakes have been crap. That's the nicest thing you can say, really, is that it's been, at best, it's been crap. At worst, like in, the example of Lion King 2019, some of the worst pieces of crap ever made. So again, that doesn't inspire any kind of confidence, right? Whenever you just hear that. And it's just getting worse because it feels like lately it's being taken up a couple of notches. Disney themselves are remaking Lilo and Stitch with, I believe, the same director that did Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. And it's like, gross. Don't want that at all. But of course they would do that because I guess that just seems to print money. And that also suggests that audiences just don't seem to care that much about original storytelling. As much as they think they want that, they always show up for a remake of the same story told again, time and time again at the box office. It's the same reason why just this past week, Bob Iger announced Frozen 3, Zootopia 2, and Toy Story 5. Why? Because that's just like printing money. And it's just like, and I know Alexis may have more to say on this when she comes back on, but it's just so infuriating that, like, Bob Chapek happened to be the person in charge when Disney and Pixar had a rather amazing run of original animated movies. Like, literally, when you think about it, that was all Bob Chapek. That was his stewardship from Onward to Soul to Raya to Luca to Encanto to Turning Red to Strange World. Those were all original animated movies. And they weren't tremendously successful in the traditional box office landscape. Well, they weren't because most of them didn't get the opportunity to even appear at the box office. So Bob Iger comes in, and what does he know what to do? Sequels. And of course, we're going to get more fucking sequels. And guess what's going to happen? Guess what's going to fucking happen? People are going to come back. They're going to show up, and they're going to make money. Frozen 3 was inevitable. I don't belabor that one. Zootopia 2. That one is the one I would say I'm the least upset with because there could definitely be more stories to tell there too. I just feel like, why would you do a sequel when you can focus on originality? But of course, we know the reason is money. The one that I seriously don't understand, like, I almost feel like Bob Iger had a fucking stroke when he said that they were developing Toy Story 5. What, I mean, like, the question that comes to your mind, like, what do you mean you're developing Toy Story 5? You've ended the franchise, like, 3 times already. From 2 to 3 to 4, like, and I know particularly you and Alexis and Kyle don't rather care for 4. I actually quite like 4. I think 4 was kind of a great send-off for Woody in particular. I think that was kind of like it, like, yeah. But why would you do it again? What's the story? Unless you're moving on to different characters, unless you're not going to involve yourself with, like, the characters that you've already, like, dedicated such prime real estate to provide closure to. I don't know what you're saying there, but it is just so depressing, David, that we had a string of really interesting and, on the whole, great original movies. Not all of them hit, but a good number of them did and were great. But it's just sad to see that got the hand that it was, and Bob Chapek ruined their chances for success. And of course, Bob Iger comes back in. Sequel. By the way, no one wants to address that Lightyear was the least successful of all those movies, and that was technically considered a sequel or a franchise. Okay, whatever. So those are my feelings on that. I'm sure you feel the same way. But I guess to the larger point is, live action remakes are terrible. For instance, just today, there was, I guess, a sneak peek at a new trailer coming our way for The Little Mermaid, 2023 version, which is, for lack of a better way of saying it, it's not a real live action film. It's mostly VFX, so that's just animation, but it's made to look realistic, right? I want to be clear here. Before that clip dropped today, we had already been very critical of how it was looking.
Mm-hmm.
David, this looks bad.
Yeah, that picture that you sent of the guy who just literally turned up the saturation.
Yeah.
In one scene, I was like, wow, that is a major fucking difference.
And that was a scene where, well, first of all, you could see anything, because like all of this, most of the trailer was like, there was no lighting.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't see anything. But in one of the few shots where you could see something, because it takes place during the day, quote unquote, even the colors there were muted.
Mm-hmm.
It looked bad. It looked bad. I even saw Grace Randolph tweeted, like, this better not be the finished effects. It's bad. And it's also, you know what makes it look even worse in comparison? Take a look at the most recent movie that featured extended underwater sequences.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, is currently the 4th highest grossing film of all time. Avatar: The Way of Water.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, those sequences, I mean, I think they earned the right to be in a film that is the 4th highest grossing film of all time. Like, Avatar: The Way of Water, I think is the best movie ever made from a visual standpoint.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
In large part due to those underwater sequences. Just amazing stuff. And then here comes Little Mermaid, just like flopping all over the place when it comes to that. Like, you shouldn't have made this movie.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't have made this, in large part because of the team currently at this studio. I think maybe if you had an ideal, like, situation, maybe still, but like, the creativity is not going to be there because it's the same team, and of course the VFX is not going to be there because all artists are being worked like dogs, and it's not going to. And then you also insist on everything being like lit, as in not at all, because it's cheaper for you to produce those effects. It's just it's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But despite that all being awful, what's even more ghastly is the idea that DreamWorks. Well, I should even say Universal Studios, who owns DreamWorks. It was broke today in the Hollywood Reporter that Universal is seeking to do a live-action remake of a DreamWorks animated franchise, and that is How to Train Your Dragon. And what makes it even weirder is the involvement of Dean DuBois, who is the writer and director of all of the films in the How to Train Your Dragon series, 1, 2, and 3. How to Train Your Dragon. It's an amazing animated series. I think you can make the contention that it is up there in the, as far as the best animated films made in the last 10 years, maybe ever. And I would also say it's in the conversation for best animated trilogy of all time. I don't know what better way to say it than to quote Council of Geeks, I think Vera, that's her name. Fuck all the way off. Fuck all the way off. Just when Disney finally seems to be backing off this nonsense, which I'm not even sure if they are. I think it looked that way, but I don't know if they are. Let's see how much Little Mermaid makes. But back to what she was saying. DreamWorks goes, hold my beer. And no, I don't care that the original writer-director is making this too. It still makes me gag. I will reiterate that I hate live-action remakes on principle. It doesn't matter who's involved with making it, because it undermines the very art of animation by reinforcing the idea that the live-action version is the real quote-unquote movie, and somehow animation doesn't count. Fuck off. And least we forget, this is all happening at the exact same time that Guillermo del Toro is going up at various award shows and saying, fuck all of you. Yes, thank you for the award, but fuck all of you for thinking the animation is just a kid's genre. It is not a genre, it is a medium. And there are a lot of complexities and there's a lot of range when it comes to the stories that come out of animation. Of course, I don't know if it... But they don't want to get that, because at the very same award show, I think it was the Critics' Choice Awards, where Guillermo went up to accept that award. Who did they ask to present that award to? A child actor, Jude Hill, who was in Belfast last year. I wonder why, of all of the awards, that's the one you would ask a literal kid to present. It's not clicking through. Mm-hmm. It's just not. And I don't know if they'll ever get that, but the point there being is, this is awful on principle alone. But then you get into like the fact that Dean himself is involved in this. And I want to quote here Houston Colley. I love Dean DeBlois, but his work on How to Train Your Dragon and his work in How to Train Your Dragon. But this is so bleak and heartbreaking. Legit makes my blood boil that even recent animated movies are being treated like proof of concept film for an eventual real, quote unquote, live action franchise. And then I guess to me, somebody else also mentioned this. The weirdest part of this is that DeBlois is directing a live action remake of a film that he directed that is going to adapt the same trilogy he made. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what he's trying to do here. Does he have a new take he wanted to do? On top of this being enraging, it's just also confusing, David.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I kind of don't find it much of a problem that the original guy wants to redo it, because I mentioned in our group chat, like, there's definitely potential to like improve the story, at least in the second and third movie. I think the first one's like perfect, honestly. Like, don't change it. Right. And that's where I'm kind of like, why would you want to make that into a live action? Like, you really did have a great movie right there. I don't know. I really don't know what else you can do with it, story-wise, at least, with that movie. But is he just writing it, or is he also directing it?
Directing.
Okay, if you're gonna direct it, I want to see some high quality shit. You know, like, I want those clothings to be real. If you're gonna use CGI backgrounds, they better be fucking top notch. Like, the thing with How to Train Your Dragon 2 that I love so much about the animation is that, like, I can see the texture in some things. Like, you can see like little hairs in the arms of some of the men in the animation. Right. When you see this giant block of ice, I can, like, you can almost tell, like, if I put my hand on it, like, it was just gonna slide off from it, you know? Like, and then you get those close-ups of the dragons, again, you can see the texture in their scales. Like, you can tell that it's rough, you know? It's not like early days of DreamWorks where everything just looked like clay, you know, and all smooth. But
when you combine this also with, there's still a live action adaptation of Invincible being made, which, you know, that I can be more understanding of, because there's room for different adaptations. Sure, you can have a live action and an animated one. I guess where it always just feels so defeatist for me is like, in no world would a live action adaptation of anything ever be as good as the animated one. Mm-hmm. Like, how would you react tomorrow if they said that, oh, they're going to have a live action, Netflix is also doing a live action series of Arcane? I mean, yeah, go ahead, knock yourselves out, but that's what you'll do in the end. You'll just get knocked out of the way. Mm-hmm. You're not going to compete with Arcane the way that it already is. That's the point. It's like, no, and where it's so enraging is, this is always one way. It's always animation to live action. It is never the reverse. No one is like out here saying, oh, when are we going to get the animated version of Avengers Endgame? And let me tell you what, if there ever was, it would be better. Why? Because you could do more. Mm-hmm. You would actually have extended sequences that wouldn't look like diarrhea, for one. Mm-hmm. Just put it out there. But the reason, this is not a two-street conversation. It's always, oh, what children's, knockoff, not even real movies can we change to make look real? Fuck all the way off with this, and I hate humanity for making this a very, profitable type of thing coming out in the movies. I'm sorry, David, you were saying?
No, I think I said everything. I just... You're not doing yourself any favors here. For me, at least, I'm expecting some high quality shit, not just like in your CGI or anything like that. I'm expecting some good shit on your cinematography, on just your world and all that. And
yeah, let's just go. Let's do a live action Mario again. Let's do live action Simpsons. Let's go ahead and get Bluey into a live action, or Blue's Clues complete live action. Yeah, why not? Yeah, let's just do it. Why don't we just cancel animation entirely? And let's just do everything like live action from now on. Why? Yeah, let's just go ahead and do it. I hate this, clearly. And I like those movies. I don't love them as much as I think you do. They're great. They're not special to me, but I like them a lot. I thought they were really great stories. And I am just offended by this on every, but going from one animation to the other. Let's talk about The Bad Batch here. I want to say this. I don't think The Bad Batch is a particularly great show. And I don't think it's all that interesting. But you know what? I enjoy myself a lot watching that show. If only because, I think the leads are entertaining enough, but I really am just fascinated. First of all, I do like the clones from as characters from the Clone Wars. I also love the Clone Wars era. I also love Star Wars. I also love the Star Wars universe. And the transition from Republic to Empire and exactly the mechanizations behind that has always been something that has interested me. So, like we said back when Bad Batch Season 1 aired, or when it dropped on Disney+, there was a lot there that was just enough to entice and get me interested. And I was thinking about this the other day when I rewatched the first episode of the series again because I want to remind myself. I think it was 2021. I want to say it was that year, that Star Wars Day when they dropped that long episode. It was a while ago at this point, but I think you yourself even said that the relationship between Hunter and Omega was basically Jin, Mando, I guess you want to call him, and Grogu, but with actual characterization. And I think that's where I go back to. It's yeah, I could say that Bad Batch might not be for everybody, but from a story standpoint and a characterization standpoint, it's still a way better show than The Mandalorian. Because and I'm gonna push back. I am. The Mandalorian is not a good show. It's not a good show for a lot of reasons. But most of those reasons are kind of traced back to the same thing, and that is the writing is terribly weak. The characterization is non-existent. And it's because it's written by a man that does not see the value in anything changing. Just recently, Jon Favreau gave an interview. Did you see that? I think I showed it yesterday. About the decision to bring back Grogu in the Book of Boba Fett instead of doing it on freaking Mandalorian. And his answer basically amounted to, well, it was hard. And also, we didn't know what to do without Grogu. So instead of taking up so much time with that in the beginning, we'll tell it in a different show. Okay.
By the way,
but yeah, go ahead.
That's the difference between The Last of Us and Book of Boba Fett, where completely deviated from the story. That
oh my god, that was comical how in that show it deviated. It was like day and night. It stopped being the Book of Boba Fett, and it just turned into the Mandalorian.
Yeah,
like that was just an episode of the Mandalorian. Like that's like you're watching freaking let's say you're watching a show like I don't know what's the procedural, like I don't know, Hawaii 5-0, and then it turns into freaking like Agents of Shield. Like, that's not the same. That was so comical. I think it was this time last year where we were living through all that, and I'm like, what? It's so laughable. They really are like low-key embarrassing, and the fans themselves just did you see that they're gonna be like dropping a documentary on the phenomenon of the Mandalorian? See that trailer that I shared where it's just like and a big part of their no, it's just a documentary about like how surprised everybody was that it was a big show. And that they included in the trailer and in the actual documentary piece the reactions to Luke Skywalker coming back.
Oh my god. Like
the actual reactions from reaction channels.
Oh my god, no.
Yeah, you should watch the trailer. It's horrendous. Anyway, Bad Batch is good. That's what I enjoy it. I enjoy it's so political. It's like I don't know if like it just makes you wonder, like, do certain Star Wars fans not realize they're being told a political story? Like, it's so like I would say the Bad Batch is actually a really good showcase for how seamless the transition can be between a republic to a fascist state.
Mm-hmm.
And it is pretty shocking. Like, you see some things here that's like, oh, they just fucking like commit genocide left and right. There are a couple. There's a limit to their their tyranny, because as you saw yourself, they still need the Senate for certain things. But just as simple as like, oh, Palpatine needed the money to start making the Death Star, and so he just took that money from the reserve that there was to keep the clone program running. So what's the solution? Oh, we'll just kill them. And we'll cover it up. And it's funny how the Empire always resorts to, oh, it was a really freak weather disaster that killed everybody. Which is like, does the Senate fall for this all the time? Because don't you remember in Rogue One, that scene where Vader is talking to Krennic about on Mustafar about like Jeddah being destroyed, and Vader was like, the Senate is being informed that a mining disaster happened. And I'm like, dude, do you play that card every time? Like a civilization like completely disappears. Like, oh yeah, weather's freaky. Okay, but I think it also just highlights how powerful Palpatine is. Like when he says, I am the Senate, even though that's kind of a meme at this point, he's not lying. He can so easily sway the Senate to whatever he wants to do. That's why, in the end, Mace Windu may have been right about that one thing, which is like he was too dangerous to be kept alive. Because if they did keep him alive, if he did stand trial, really, that wouldn't have worked out great for the Jedi in the end. What would have happened is Palpatine would have been freed, and the Jedi would have been arrested or executed. So it was a bad situation there. And of course, I guess to me, what's really interesting is seeing the transition from clones into stormtroopers. I really enjoyed the Commander Cody episode. Yeah. And it's really like he never at all says in the episode what he's going to do, but you really get off what he's going to do by the look on his face. Like you can tell, and also in just D. Bradley Baker doesn't get enough credit for like how great of a voice actor he is, being able to like distinct all these different characters, and it's the same voice. But yeah, there was a really great scene I liked where it's the end of that episode, and he's just like realizing, what the fuck? Like, what did we just turn into?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it does have some Andor vibes. Now, it's not on the level of Andor, but it's got some Andor vibes. And, if we didn't mention it before, Andor was fucking incredible.
Yeah.
And so fucking anti-fascist. Like, again, like, that could also be why some particular Star Wars fans didn't like or vibe with Andor, because it was anti-fascist. And maybe that's implying that some of those people are rather okay with fascism or don't really comprehend what it looks like, which is sad.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the Clone Wars animation style very much, and so that continues to be the case. I do wonder what the end goal is for the show.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like where these people end up.
I mean, I want to say it's gotta be with Omega, because not only like are the clone troopers realizing like what the fuck have we become,
right?
But slowly though, Omega, she's the one that's sort of realizing, sort of seeing the ins and outs of what the Republic is doing. What happened beforehand too, and it's like she's just getting all this information and kind of like processing it all.
Also, is she Force sensitive?
I don't know. They really, if she is, they're trying really hard to just hide it, because like I can't really tell. I know there was that one episode with the Wookiee Jedi, and
right.
I don't know. It's just like it really didn't seem much of like they had a connection through the Force. It was just sort of like, this is clearly a child. I want to help this child.
Yeah, I guess we'll see where that goes. With the Bad Batch here. But it's just gonna be like, I don't know. I'm getting my Star Wars fix from that, and then when Mando comes back, everybody's gonna be like, lining up for blowjobs left and right. It doesn't matter what it is; they'll still be lining up.
Yeah.
So that's disappointing for me because it's just gonna be so annoying. Real quick, these Quantumania reviews. Wow. I mean, is it really surprising a movie directed by Peyton Reed would garner the reaction that it has? I guess what's changed now is the idea that critics themselves and the media is not getting what they want out of it. And what they want out of it is a point to the cinematic universe. And what does that mean? In which every single piece is in service of the cinematic universe. That doesn't necessarily mean that the movies have been bad themselves. I like Wakanda Forever. I like Thor: Love and Thunder. I like Multiverse when the sound is off. I really love Eternals. There's individual pieces here and there that I think work just fine as movies, but this is where the crux ends up, just failing everything. Whereas like the individual pieces cannot be entirely standalone, and so they still have to service something. But then it's like you're burning the candle at both ends because nobody's satisfied with that. Okay. Then this one comes out, and I want to say that while the patience has run out for sure from a lot of critics and the media, and that definitely is played into why the reactions have been not great, I also do. I want to give Peyton Reed his due. I'm sure he made a genuinely bland, boring, forgettable movie. And you got to give credit where credit is due. Only Peyton Reed can make you feel that hollow. And I speak from personal experience because, and I remember at the time, go back and read the reviews that Ant-Man and the Wasp got. Such a genuinely abysmal experience. And you think that was going to produce something that was going to be worth anything? No, we clearly didn't. And these reactions have been hilarious to read. I'll be honest with you. Like, there was one of the tweets said that they overheard somebody like saying, well, at least it wasn't garbage. Okay. At the moment, it's the second lowest rated movie for Rotten Tomatoes, which is at a 52%. It's their second Rotten movie. Eternals somehow is still the lowest one, which is just stupid. Like, really, just incredibly stupid. I'm gonna be honest with you, David. I don't know if I'm gonna watch this movie.
Really?
I don't know. Kyle's not.
Really? Okay.
He's already told me he's not watching it. Peter's like, if I catch it, cool. If not, I don't know. So I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know. If I have nothing else going on, I'll go. I guess I'll go see it. But like, I don't know. I don't. Yeah, but I'm definitely here for all the disappointment and for the MCU needs a stinker.
Yeah, for sure.
It's long past time. They need that because they refuse to change, and they know what their problems are, but they don't care. Well, they need a disaster to help make us reprioritize certain things.
Yeah, no, especially with this one, because honestly, this is like the ultimate point of what it was wrong with the Phase 4.
Right.
And that is that, for one thing, I blame the audience. They were like, hey, what's our next Thanos? You know, where are you setting up? What's our next Infinity War? You know, it's just like, whoa. And for me, like, I thought this from right after, before Endgame came out, I was like, after this, reset. Like, you know, you're back to Phase 1. This isn't Phase 5, this is Phase 1 again. And you gotta give origin stories for your new characters that you want to bring up. Either origin stories or, you know, make your Captain Falcon movie or TV show is what they did with this. You know? And then figure out who your Loki villain is. And it should have been Wanda, by the way. It should have been her. And then build up to your next Infinity Saga. Or what's this one called? Multiverse Saga? Or
I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't know and I don't care, and I guess that's where it ultimately comes down to. Is we have reached a point where I'm seriously considering skipping an MCU movie. That's where we are.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The only reason why I'm watching is because of the actress that plays Ant-Man's daughter. I really like that actress. I think every movie that I've seen of her in it, I haven't been disappointed. This one I'll probably be disappointed in the movie, but I'm not gonna be disappointed in her in her performance.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, man, it's just everything about that movie just like screams. I don't matter. I'm ugly. I'm abysmal. Yeah, that's what that movie screams. When you compare that to the slate of movies and projects that James Gunn announced at DC, I think when you look at those two things at the same time, we might be in the midst of a paradigm shift here. Because the projects that were announced by James Gunn, well, there were a lot of things. For one, they were rather unconventional. There were a lot of things that were like mentioned that I don't think anybody was expecting. Mixed in with some that were rather predictable, but still, the idea that James Gunn is going to be shepherding DC is so exciting, if only because James Gunn himself is a fabulous filmmaker and has proven himself to produce exemplary work, particularly in this genre, from the Guardians movies to the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. And look no further to how incredible the trailers have looked like for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Just like really good stuff in those trailers. And it's so striking, right? To see like when you compare those trailers to the Ant-Man trailers, the Guardians trailers have, I don't know, there's a sense of like tragedy and there's a sense of character and story that you just don't see in the other ones. Like they're movies and not trailers for something that comes better. But as far as the slate that he announced, I'll say I think the ones that make the most sense that he was already working on, I would say the Creature Commandos animated series, which seems to be like a spiritual successor to the Suicide Squad, which might be phased out since the revelation that came out of Peacemaker. That also like leeways into Waller, which sees the Peacemaker crew and cast coming back, I guess teaming up with Waller. I don't know how that goes into all of it, but those seem to be the projects he was already working on when he was asked to basically run DC films. And anything he's doing, I'm going to be in. Like the idea that he's writing Superman Legacy. Like, I hope he directs it. I really hope he... And if he doesn't, well, there are other contenders. I think, considering... his name was thrown out there, and honestly, that might not be a bad call. Andy Muschietti could direct the Superman film if The Flash ends up being as good as they say it is. We'll see. But I'm just genuinely excited because, you know, I don't know these characters. I don't know Booster Gold. I don't know The Authority. I don't know so many of these people. But what I do know is what he said, and that is he is committed to these stories being their own thing and feeling different from one another. And also his commitment to not shoot anything until a script is finished. Now, people listening at home might think, well, duh, why would anybody do that? Marvel does that on the regular. They do that with all of their movies. So, and that makes a difference. So there you see a clear distinction of priorities with DC and with Marvel, and they're polar opposites. All the things that James Gunn himself listed as like what most concerns him is not what concerns Kevin Feige. What concerns him is interconnectivity. What concerns him is it funny? It's not and hasn't been, but that's what he most concerns himself with. So genuinely speaking, I'm very excited. I don't know too many of these characters, but it doesn't matter because I just feel like they have the right approach, and Marvel's kind of going, you know, downhill now. What was your reaction to James Gunn's slate?
His slate got me excited to actually look up some of the comics that he's basing these off of. For one thing, I had this before the slate came out, but now I'm kind of like want to get more of it. But I have this comic, All-Star Superman, which is what,
that's a good cover.
Oh, it's so great. I mean,
yeah,
back of it, it's ginormous, and it's even got like a. Hold on, it's right here.
I love when we do show and tell here, but we can't show anything to the audience. I'm the only one seeing anything.
Yeah, and this is just like the bookcase of it. You know, it's
that's good. Nice. Yeah.
But yeah, that's gonna be what the comic, the Superman Legacy, is gonna be based off of. Same thing, and then fucking what's it called? Supergirl. What is it? Woman of Tomorrow or something like that. I didn't know if it was like actually based off like a series of comics or anything like that, but when I saw the pictures of it, I was like, oh my gosh, that looks really, really pretty. And the story, do you know the story of that one?
No, I don't actually know.
Supergirl, her.
Oh wait, no, I think I do. Like she goes on a revenge fest, right?
I don't know if it's like a revenge fest, but basically Supergirl and a bunch of other Kryptonians survive the destruction of Krypton. And they're just living off the debris of it, and she's the only survivor of the debris. And I don't know what happens afterwards. Like I don't know if they just said like she's definitely a more hardened version.
Right, a hardened, yeah, for sure. No, it's also exciting. Even now, this is a little bit of a double-edged sword because it is going to be somewhat, at the very least, distracting to have two Batman series running concurrently, two live action Batman series, and it's also going to be like unfair because we're going to be comparing them to each other and like, well, they did this better here or they did this better there. I understand Matt Reeves wants to be left alone. Fine, leave him alone. He needs to make the stories that he wants to, and perhaps it's fair for James Gunn to not have his plans be hindered by what Matt Reeves may or may not do. Fine. But it's just going to be strange and distracting, and I would say also genuinely confusing for the general audience, because like, and I think I expect the Batman 2 to be released before The Brave and the Bold, and I can respect that it's going to be different because in tone for sure, because I think The Brave and the Bold is going to be, and I think James Gunn said himself, going to be introducing the Bat family, which I think will be the first, I guess, true live action adaptation of that, and it can get a little bit more out there and supernatural than I guess the Reeves verse would be like. But you're gonna get that situation happen where, let's say Batman 2, which I believe is gonna come out 2025, and let's say Brave and the Bold comes out the following year, people are gonna be thinking, oh, this is Batman 3, and then like, what? Mm-hmm. That's gonna inevitably happen. But I am excited with the idea of Robin coming back into the picture in live action, because I have been, wanting to see that story. And, Nolan did this, so did Snyder and Reeves's. Yes, we all love our dark and brooding Batman, but I think there's room for, a different side of the character at this point. Mm-hmm. Like, I really, for the first time last year, watched Batman the Mask of the Phantasm. That was amazing. And I think we need more Batman stories that vary in tone than what we've been getting. So I'm all for it, but it is going to be distracting at the very least to have this happening at the exact same time.
Yeah.
I think you feel the same way?
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see the Bat family. I've been wanting to see a live action version of them for a long time, especially because like it is,
you weren't getting it with BVS, that's for sure.
You weren't getting with BVS, and it's also like it's really complicated to kind of like write it in a way that it's not weird, the fact that this adult is training a kid to become a hero. Like it's always been super awkward, and so just to kind of like skip it, basically like the training of it, and some of the Bat family, and just kind of be like, okay, yeah, we started with this. I think it's probably better off to do that. And I kind of hope they keep the title Brave and the Bold, but don't say Batman the Brave and the Bold. Just keep it the Brave and the Bold, because that will probably help the general audience separate it. Because that's what happened with Birds of Prey. You remember they called it? It was called like the one, I can't remember, like The Wonderful Tale of Harley Quinn or something like that. And people,
yeah,
and then
the Emancipation of Harley Quinn.
Yeah, that's what it is. But then later on, the posters and even like the theaters, they just changed it to Birds of Prey, and that's what kind of got audiences to come in for some reason. So hopefully that'll help out. One criticism that I do understand from people is that the comics that he's basing these off of, it's sort of like in the end of their run for the heroes. Like, Brave and the Bold, we're not getting the origin story. We're not getting, year 2 or 3 of his story. Like, no, this is like, I wouldn't say towards the end of his life or anything, but like, we're definitely getting into an older version of him.
It's the second half of Batman's career.
Yeah. All-Star Superman, the comic is about Superman dying. He got too close to the sun and some sort of radiation got to him, and he's like slowly dying, and he's trying to like kind of get these last little moments of his life before things start going downhill for him and all that. And so it's kind of weird to start off your first Superman movie with that. Now, I mean, there's a lot of story you can tell in between, like from when he knows that he's dying and to his actual death or something. I haven't got to the end of the comic, by the way, so I don't know how exactly it ends. So I mean, it doesn't. So there's, even though
there's some inconsistencies you can say, because like, why is it that we're gonna get a Batman that's so late into his career, but you're gonna get a younger and introduced Superman?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and maybe also a younger Wonder Woman. So it's strange for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I guess some of the choices that are being made. So I guess we'll have to see, right?
Yeah.
How it all pans out. But like, I appreciate a plan, you know, being in place. But I more so than that, I just appreciate the person behind the plan and his sensibilities, and that is James Gunn. He don't miss.
Mm-hmm.
He don't miss. While we're on the nature of DC, what were your genuine reactions to the Flash trailer? Because honestly, I gotta be, I liked it.
Yeah.
There was some spots where I'm not sure if the VFX were ready yet.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I had fun with it. It might actually be pretty interesting. I'm not seeing yet in that trailer why it's so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it looks like a really good comic book movie, but I'm not seeing why it's being so raved about, you know? But there were, you know, moments in there that I genuinely was interested in, like Michael Keaton being back as Batman. That was exciting to see. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was, it did seem like it does seem like a fun movie. And I'm curious about Michael Keaton returning for that one. But yeah, I mean, there's not really much of they didn't tell you much of what the plot is exactly. Mm-hmm. So it does not, I don't really know what is going to be going on. I know like what the story is based off of and everything, and I can see like, oh, okay, you're making same beats here. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, overall, it really just does look fun. So who knows?
Okay. So apparently, I was going to say Daisy Johnson, but she's one and the same with Chloe Bennett. Apparently, she's going to come back to the MCU in the form of nobody knows. But one of the sources not sources, but one of the reporters, I want to call her that, who mostly is always right with Marvel, Grace Randolph. I know some people will like, ugh, why are you mentioning her name in there? But I trust her sources at Marvel, and she's saying that she's heard that she's coming back, but she's not sure what project it is. I have to assume it's going to be the Secret Invasion show, right? Because that's the one it's been linked to for like years now. And again, we're talking about like a cameo at best, like a traditional cameo. Like maybe she shows up for like a couple of seconds and she like dips. I'm not expecting an actual role if that's the case, but it could portend for something that comes in the future. I want to say I recently rewatched the finale to the show, and you know what, David? It's been like almost 3 years now. It has aged very well for me. The ending, I want to say, keeping in mind, of course, that there were always there were limitations in terms of budget here and there, but on the whole, they really did nail a really satisfying finale, and things. Let's say. I enjoy what the actor was trying to do with Nathaniel Malick, but I do think the writing when it comes to the villains was a particular weak spot. We mentioned as it was airing in real time, but it genuinely is not as captivating as it once was. I think you can make the argument that as far as the villains are concerned, the writing peaked in season 5. No, 4 maybe even. As far as like interesting and captivating, they couldn't top Ada, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And while the following villains weren't terrible, but some of them were not as engaging as they were. I'm genuinely wondering like what, maybe if they had no other options but the writing just wasn't there, for the villains anyway. What did age better, not that it was bad to begin with, but I really do enjoy the rapport, the dynamic that we get with Susan, with Daisy, and I really do buy them as a couple. that actually aged better this time around than it was initially. Even Korra herself, I didn't mind. She kind of felt like she was thrown in the last minute because she was at the very tail end of the season. But still, she's fine. Not terrible, as I guess some people were saying. But on the whole, it's just a really enjoyable season, and I think it stuck the landing in a rather good way. So, what do you think about Chloe Bennett coming back?
I'm excited for the actress. I hope she stays the same, and I think she'll probably bring some good fun into the MCU. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking that's going to happen most likely. Before we go today, David, I want to ask you, so you saw some movies here. You saw The Fabelmans by Steven Spielberg, and you saw The Banshees of Inisherin by Martin McDonagh. Both of those films have been all over awards season, as you do know. They were actually the two big winners at the Golden Globe Awards. Fabelmans winning Best Picture Drama and Best Director for Steven Spielberg, and Banshees winning for Best Picture Comedy Musical, Banshees, and then of course Best a Screenplay for Martin McDonagh, and then it also won Best Actor Comedy Musical for Colin Farrell. Both of those films have gone on to be nominated just about everywhere else. I think Banshees received something like 9 Academy Award nominations, and Fabelmans received 7 Academy Award nominations for big categories like Best Picture, Director, Screenplay, and then some acting nods as well. Interestingly enough, I don't expect either of those movies to do great at the Oscars. There's a genuine chance both movies might win nothing come Academy night, considering how the expectation at the moment is that Everything Everywhere All at Once is going to sweep and overperform. And so that could likely leave both movies out of the equation. But no matter what happens, they had their moment in the sun with the Golden Globes at the very least, and so I was happy about that. I mean, it made no secret that both those movies are among my very favorites of last year. And based on my interactions with you, it seemed that you would agree, at least with how you think of those movies. So you can choose which one you want to talk about first, but go ahead.
We'll start off with Banshees. This one, this is just a really kind of surprising movie because I really didn't know what to expect from this. I know people found it funny and all that and kind of moving. But yeah, I was just kind of very surprised by the comedy of it. Like it was, it's kind of like straight to the point.
It's funny in there, it's that oddball kind of comedy where you kind of least expect it because like it is kind of a depressing situation that a lot of these characters are in, but man, when it gets in some zingers in there, it's like, whoa, this is genuinely it. It's the style of comedy that Martin is known for. Again, if you saw 3 Billboards, did you see 3 Billboards?
Yeah, I did.
It's exactly that kind of tone.
Okay. Oh, sorry. But yeah, and then just the performances all around were just so super great, especially fucking Barry Keoghan. Yes. Him, I didn't see a lot of trailers for this movie, so like I really had no idea that he was in this movie at all, and I thought he was probably gonna have like a minor role. So like, I thought he was going to have a minor role, and so when he was getting awards, I was like, what the heck did he do in this movie? Like I really hadn't seen him in any footage. And then when he shows up, like 5 minutes in, I was like, oh yeah, you're fucking killing it.
He's the scene stealer in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's incredible.
Yeah, for sure. Fuck. But yeah, I mean, just and overall though, like I really just like the story of, 2 guys just randomly separating at some point. Reasons. I mean, I say weird reasons, but I understand. I can't remember his name. The old guy.
Calm. There was Calm, that was by Brendan Gleeson, and then there's Podrick, who is Colin Farrell. So it's Podrick and Calm. And Calm doesn't want to be friends anymore. with Podrick, and the reasons are not immediately revealed. And I think overall, the reasons are kind of beyond the point, right? I think like ultimately what the film or what the story here is saying is, for any number of reasons, there are situations where people who have been friends for a long time one day could not be friends. And I guess the reasons don't necessarily matter. It's more or less trying to really depict how devastating it can be. Again, no matter the reasons, the end of a friendship like that. And we see how it plays out. And again, it can be quite humorous, but it's also really sad. It's a really, it captures a melancholy tone for sure. And it's just, I love the screenplay. The script is amazing in this movie. Like, so many wonderful lines. And I also really enjoy, my favorite character in the movie was actually Carrie Condon. She played Shaban, Podrick's sister that he lives with. And she was like the rational one, where she was like, "You're all feckin' miserable on this feckin' island." That's so funny. The use of feckin', or freckin', or whatever they said in the movie. No, genuinely speaking, I enjoyed this movie every time I saw it. I think I've seen it like 3 or 4 times now. I saw it twice in theaters. I think the first time I saw it with Nettie, at Coronado Island, it was like this vintage movie theater. It was so good. And the second, I saw it with Peter at it doesn't matter where, but it was in San Diego somewhere. But it was, honestly, it's a rather oddball movie. It's kind of unique. You're not going to find too many other movies like this, where it kind of like has that particular tone, but it has a lot to say for sure. But I think ultimately its main point at the end of the day was that, maybe it's not so bad being friends. Maybe. Who knows? With that person. Because I think it leaves you with the idea that, well, it keeps going, and maybe that's for the best. So it leaves things in an ambiguous way, like, well, did they make up or didn't they? Well, I guess that's left with you to decide like how that thing it left off with. But no, it's a very enjoyable film. It's quiet and intimate, but then again, I prefer that, right? So I genuinely, it's a beautiful movie. I love where it was shot. Wow, what a beautiful island! The cinematography, some of those those scenes where they're just sitting by the pub with the freaking ocean behind them. Yeah. Oh my God. It's like that's filmmaking right there. So I'm happy that it's done as well as it has, for sure. And for those of you who are listening, what the fuck are you waiting for? Go to HBO Max and stream The Banshees of Inisherin. It's so good. It's definitely one of my favorites of the year. And so going from one favorite to another favorite, you saw The Fabelmans by Steven Spielberg. And it's interesting because I feel like on the chat, I've kind of like been laying the groundwork. I've been doing my best to temper your guys' like expectations down, because like I feel like that's gotten in the way for some people to enjoy this movie. Because first of all, there's people who think that was a bad trailer to I don't see how, but whatever. They think that it's a movie about Hollywood and how movies are made, and it is that it's also not. And when they find out that it's rather a much more personal story than that, it like, I don't know, like a lot of people feel like it was pretentious, but then there's a different set of people who are like, it was fine, but it wasn't the best thing in the world. And I kind of don't get it. And you know what I come to realize is I really do vibe with like slice of life movies where you just see a person's life shake out and there's not much quote unquote plot moving it, but there's so much good going on that you just don't care, and you just live with these characters. Like, it reminds me a lot of why I loved Licorice Pizza from last year, which was by Paul Thomas Anderson, which you can catch on Vudu if you want to, because it also is based off of the era that he grew up in. But then also Luca, where a lot of the movie is just like they're in the Italian Riviera and they're living.
Mm.
And of course, there are other themes there too. It's not just that. But I genuinely do vibe with just like those vibe in movies. But I can understand why that can leave people a little cold, or I guess, I don't know, bored or disinterested. I don't know. But on the whole, I love this movie. And I love it each time I see it again. And it's even surprised me, because when I first saw it, again, I keep saying this, I thought that the movie was really good, but I wasn't in love with it. But the more I've seen it technically I've seen it like 6 or 7 times now. And I saw it in theaters 5 times. It's crazy. All in different, because it came back in theaters because it got the Best Picture nomination. And I saw it twice. I genuinely adore this movie. And all of what it has to say. And I think what keeps me coming back to it is that there's a lot about the childhood that Sammy Fabelman had, and who he is, and what he represents, and how he carries himself. That's just very appealing to me. I don't know what it is. It's hard for me to understand people who walk away and saying that they were bored, because to me, this is where Steven Spielberg shines. He cannot stop himself from making an endlessly charming film. Mm-hmm. And it looks amazing too. I love the cinematography. The production design was stellar. They recreated all of his childhood homes to perfection. The cast was insatiable. Every person in this movie just a wonderful showcase. And you have an amazing lead with Gabriel LaBelle in his first ever movie ever, as Sammy Fabelman. He keeps doing this as Mr. Spielberg. He just finds, like, Rachel Zegler's first movie was last year with West Side Story. Like, he just finds these like diamonds in the rough out of nowhere. It's incredible. Like, Gabriel LaBelle was so good. Like, he carries the film. And honestly, it's really disappointing that he wasn't considered for awards because of his age. And if we're being honest with ourselves, that's what it was really that came down to it. It's so joyous. I mean, it is tragic in moments, and you feel, oh my God, there were some sequences here that I think some of the best that Spielberg has ever put to camera. Mm-hmm. But it's also, I think, his funniest movie to date. There's some real funny stuff here. So on the whole, again, it's like my 3rd or 4th review on this show talking about this movie, but like, go watch it, people. I loved it so much, and I was so happy to hear that you enjoyed it yourself as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved it. You said it. Like, it's a very charming movie that I honestly kind of relate to it quite a bit, mostly from Sammy Fabelman. Just kind of like the way he sort of processes his work, the creativity of it, trying to make his movies and all that. I remember, going to school, I kind of had to like force myself to get really creative with my projects, just to kind of like try to do something better. And there were moments though where kind of like I go, let me try this, and it worked, and it pays off, and I'm kind of like, that's cool.
Yeah.
And so those little moments where he tried to get some more creative with his work, and it pays off really well. It was fun to watch that. And I mean, I just kind of, it's just that story of kind of, I don't know how to explain it. Like,
well, it is also a coming of age movie, and I love those movies. Like, I mean, like, again, Luca and Turning Red could also be described as coming of age films.
But I mean, this particular one though, it's just sort of that struggle of wanting to just really put a focus on your work and nothing else. And it's kind of hard balancing that out of not just...
You had that amazing scene with Judd Hirsch where he pops into the movie. It's like, family art, it'll tear you in two. That was a great monologue.
I mean, it's not that like I struggle with that or anything like that. It's just kind of like I understand. I understand your struggle.
But it's also like Spielberg being honest with himself. It's like that's, I'm sure, the struggle he's felt his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Where like it may be that, you know, it's a low key way of saying perhaps that, you know, that's how he failed sometimes in his life when it comes to not always being there for his family. Not all of the time, but maybe some of the time. But also, you know, even more so than that, the reason he made this movie was to forgive both of his, finally, he's 76.
Mm-hmm.
Can you believe that? Finally forgive his parents for the trauma of divorce. And like him now being a fully aged adult, this movie is basically his way of saying, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You guys were my parents, but there comes a point where I fully understand why each of you did what you did. I forgive you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in the movie. It's actually the last scene that Mitzi, played by Michelle Williams, has with Sammy. This is after the prom. And she's like asking him to forgive her for like hitting him earlier on in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, if you kind of like dive deeper into that, like that's basically Steven writing it as if like his mom in real life, Lee Adler, was asking him to forgive her for her role in breaking up the family.
Mm-hmm.
And it could also be read in a different way too, as it could also be read as an apology to his father for blaming him for so many years, for why the marriage fell apart. He blamed him for so many years because he didn't really know. He didn't know the entire time. There was like, it wasn't really him that fell out of love. It was her.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, what's really interesting about Mitzi as a character, now again, some may argue that it wasn't nuanced enough, maybe, sure, but like, I guess the difference is like, I know that her performance maybe can put people off, whatever, but when she said that she was still in love with, you know, the dad,
mm-hmm.
with Bert is her husband, but she also loves Benny, I believed her.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like she fell out of, like, it wasn't a completely loveless marriage, because if that was the case, I think she would have left him a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, she's called selfish throughout the movie, and she herself calls herself selfish, but she stuck with it for such a long time, not just because she felt like she had a sense of duty for her kids, that was part of it, but also because she genuinely loves Bert. And I think you know how I know that's true? Because later on in their lives, they remarried. Yes, Lee and I believe also, yeah, Steven's parents. Like, so what happened was, yeah, they divorced, and she got married to the person that she ended up falling in love with, but later on, they got remarried in their 90s.
That's really nice.
Yeah, isn't that like that's like?
And one of the kids said it. Like, I can't remember what she said about Benny, you know, but like throughout the movie, you can tell like, oh, there's a connection between these two. Like,
it was his sister. I think it was the sequence after they announced the divorce. Sammy's in his room and he's going over the film that he's going to show for at prom. And the sister, played by Julia Butters, walks in and she's saying like, well, maybe it was just hard for her being married to somebody that she could never live up to. And whereas Benny, and you see it almost from the beginning,
mm-hmm.
you see there's a connection there that's, you know, and you know what makes it difficult for me? It's like, it's hard to root for one over the other, because you see how great they all work together.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also, and I don't know if you caught this, but like in that initial dinner sequence, when they're all having dinner at the first time, to the beginning of the film, and the mom, or I believe Bert's mom, is over, and she's like looking at them like, does anybody else see what's going on here?
Yeah. And the way she like oh my god, like talks down to Benny when one of the kids goes, Uncle Benny or something like that.
Yeah.
And she goes, he's not your uncle. He's not your uncle.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, oh my gosh, she knows and she fucking hates it. Damn.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but I was gonna say too, like one of the sisters, she said it like the dad was her biggest fan. And that's kind of
her best audience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
Dad's always been her best audience.
Yeah, and that's sort of like the thing with the relationship. It's like, okay, yeah, the dad was her best audience. Like, yeah, when they were younger, she probably liked that he gave her attention and actually liked her work or something like that, But through time, shit changes, you kind of want,
for sure.
Either she wanted something different or she just, I don't know. I mean, I'm not in love or anything like that, so it's hard for me to explain it. But like,
right, love itself is hard to quantify.
Yeah,
you just can't really. And I think what you were just saying there can best be there's a lot of great sequences in the movie here that are like almost entirely without dialogue. And the one that you brought back to mind was in the camping trip, and Mitzi's just dancing with the headlights, and they're just watching, and we cut to Mitzi, to Bert, and to Benny, back to Bert, and then to Mitzi, and you see it right then and there. It's just like, it's a genuine love triangle, but the kind that we don't see in movies often, where like, usually when you see love triangles in films, it's like, I guess, more bitter and more like confrontational, and usually they're kind of the point of those movies or those relationships, whereas here it's just a real thing that happened, and you're just showing it as if it happened, and you seeing actual adults manage it. It's difficult, that's for sure. And that's why I find it hard to like be so tough on her, because that's just in her nature to be so much larger than life. But I would also say that for the accusations that are being thrown at her for being selfish, I mean, she acknowledges herself that she can be that way, and it's hard. It's difficult for sure. But speaking of other sequels, I mean, there's just so many scenes in this movie. Like, of course, all of the scenes where he's making movies, Sammy, are so much fun. But when they can be devastating in a number of different ways, it's, oh my God, I was like entranced with how amazing the sequence was where he's making the camping trip film, and he catches basically that his mom loves Benny. Like, wow. And the music playing over that's actually that's a piece of classical music. It's not a John Williams original piece of music, but he did compose it obviously for the movie. That song actually, I guess where it's kind of meta, or I guess what adds more into it, that particular piece of music is one that Steven Spielberg's real mom would often play at home. So that's where it adds a little bit, of an extra layer to it. Like just the power behind that. But that whole sequence was like, oh my God. Everything involving Judd Hirsch was hilarious and brilliant and poignant. And you know what? Some people thought that the film kind of like lost its way when it got to the high school stuff, in the California scenes. I enjoyed it. It
was fun, but it definitely slowed down.
The girlfriend was hilarious. It was so worth it just for her. She was so good, and she's also relatively new on the scene. Chloe East, I believe. Yeah, it's a great film, and I would hope it's not completely forgotten and left for dead by the time the Academy comes. But judging how these things usually go, when there's a film that just so touches my heart, well, we can always count on it to be left at the checking station, waiting for its awards that ultimately would never come. But hey, it got the Golden Globe for Best Picture and Best Director. That's not nothing. Some people would say it's nothing. I'm going to say it's basically everything at this point. But I was so happy to hear you enjoyed it. I'm hoping at some point Alexis sees these movies and talks about them. But I know we're all, of course, terribly busy these days. But anything else to say on the movie?
That ending was so
yes, that's right.
Awesome. In school, my teacher told us like a story that basically was kind of like the ending. But I can't remember who it was exactly. But he pointed out like the best advice that some director got was from someone else, and he goes, "It's like there's one important rule: horizon line here and here." And it's just like that's how he like gets told off. Like that's the most important thing in cinematography. And so, and that scene came up, and the guy I can't remember who the name. But
in the movie?
In the movie, yeah.
In the movie, it's so that's interesting because that is in the movie director John Ford, who was a real director and who was in real life Steven Spielberg's favorite director, John Ford. The movies that he grew up watching, and what makes it even more meta is that John Ford in the movie The Fabelmans is played by a well-known director, David Lynch.
That's cool. And so in that scene, when he asks him like, "Tell me about that picture." He just goes into details, and I'm pointing out something different than he is.
Right.
But then he mentions like, "No, where's the horizon line?" I'm like, that's fucking funny. Because like... Because it really is important. Like I mean, I don't know if anyone like ever actually notices it when cinematography, but like when I'm just taking pictures too, I'm kind of like, wait, where do I point it at? It's just it's these little details. And then at the end of it, you know, he's outside the studio, he's outside the building, and he's walking away, and the fucking camera shifts to let you know. It's like, this is the damn difference between the horizon lines.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I love that ending for all that and more, but I just love like that moment before he steps down the stairs and he starts like hopping off. It's just like him taking that moment to breathe, and like he's not saying anything, but you see on his face, like, this is it. This is the beginning of my life. This is what I've waited for the entire time. And then, of course, the John Williams music kicks in, and I guess you could consider this like his version of a Steven Spielberg theme motif. Because if you notice, it's kind of subtle, but the music that starts building when Sammy walks down those stairs and then inevitably walks into the sunset, that's the same motif that is used the first time Mitzi hands a camera to Sammy, to little boy Sammy Fabelman. So again, the music here, while not entirely original, a lot of it is, but some of it is not, is so good. And of course, it's a John Williams score. Of course, it's going to be good. But I think it's not appreciated enough because it's just not as noticed. But if you go back and watch the film several times, you'll notice it. Also, a great soundtrack as well of like popular songs.
Oh yeah. No, this one I definitely noticed the soundtrack and score, because in my theater, if you remember my text, the speakers were, something was wrong with them. Like,
how were they?
So like the soundtrack, sound effects and all that, like those were perfectly fine. It's when people talked, it sounded like someone, you know, when people talk on the phone and you hear like the other line, like in the old days, it sounded like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh. But then you heard the score and the soundtrack louder?
Yeah, I heard that one. It was good. it was normal. It was easier to pay attention to.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I would encourage you to watch it again on our Movies Anywhere. It's on there right now. Yeah. It's pathetic how much of a Spielberg shill I am, because I purchased this when it was available on premium video on demand. I purchased it for like $25. It was the day of his birthday. So Yeah, I've like shelled out so much money for this movie, but I don't care. I love it so much. But yeah, you should watch it again. That way you can get the actual audio. And then also subtitles are a plus. So in case you miss something.
Yeah, I need to rewatch the uncle.
Yeah. Oh, for
scene.
sure.
I couldn't understand.
Oh yeah. And they're readily available whenever you want. So yeah, but good. Thank you for pointing out the end. It was a great fucking ending. Loved it. Anywho, thank you, David, for being here. And thank you all for listening. Stay tuned here on Red Spotlight, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.